Pokemon designs are born from a variety of different inspirations. Nature, mythology, khakis, but one theme is as interesting as it is underutilized, which serves as the basis for this PokeRogue challenge: music. This suggestion came from Cadenather, and I knew it would be a fun one as soon as I spotted it. And thankfully the comment lists a few Pokemon to start us off. But before we get to that, let's start with the rules. The challenge this time around will be as follows. I'll only be using Pokemon which could fill a role in a band. This means if there's a strong argument that they wouldn't bomb the headline performance, they're allowed on the team. But if we're being reasonable, this already disqualifies the overwhelming majority of Pokemon. Sorry Wobbuffet, you're just not cut out for the big stage. Additionally, we'll be using the usual rules. No starters that cost 6 or more points, and no resetting battles. So without further ado, let's talk team members. And of course, the face of almost every band is the vocalist. So it shouldn't come as much surprise that our first team member is Igglybuff. While I could take Jigglypuff as my starter, I don't actually get any access to egg moves or passive abilities unless I take Igglybuff. So we'll have a little bit of extra work to do. Thankfully, Igglybuff does well at punching well above its weight, especially with the notoriously strong passive ability, Huge Power. Wigglytuff usually has pretty mediocre stats across the board, with the only exception being 140 base HP. But with Huge Power, this big balloon will be stronger than the likes of Salamence, Metagross, and Solgaleo. And with access to moves like Drain Punch, Grav Apple, and Play Rough, Wigglytuff will be a respectable offensive powerhouse that can trade blows well. And while Wigglytuff will struggle against Eternatus, it'll be a valuable check to Rayquaza thanks to its fairy typing. Also, PokeRogue has added nicknaming since it last featured on the channel, so we'll be able to add a little bit of extra personalization to each member of the team. I named Igglybuff Celine, because my contemporary music knowledge is non-existent. So our band has its vocalist, but now it's time to add the music. And there's one obvious choice for our guitarist. Meet Sting, our Toxel. Toxtricity is one of two pretty obvious members of this group, and it's one of the most interesting options as well. Toxtricity has access to Shift Gear, one of the single best setup moves in the entirety of Pokemon. But it also has a high special attack stat, and strong special attacking moves as egg moves, meaning Toxtricity can be used physically, specially, or as a mixed sweeper. Toxtricity also has two fantastic abilities. Its standard ability Punk Rock boosts the power of sound-based moves by 30%, and its passive ability Electric Surge creates electric terrain when it enters battle, boosting electric-type moves by 50%. And with its signature move Overdrive, an electric-type special attack which benefits from both boosts and targets multiple opponents at once, Toxtricity will be invaluable for sweeping through double battles and punching through strong opponents with incredibly powerful attacks. While other members of the team may be dragging behind, Grookey will be rushing ahead as the single strongest Pokemon on the team. With solid stats, access to a Gigantamax form, and strong egg moves like Clangorous Soul and Sappy Seed, Grookey will be setting the pace of the team and serving as the reliable powerhouse to deal with major threats. Though unfortunately, I'm missing Grookey's hidden ability Grassy Surge, which means I miss out on priority and a big defense boost from its passive ability Grass Pelt. But nevertheless, Grookey will be the one setting the tempo for the other team members to follow. And if you recognize where the nickname comes from, you've got great taste. Now we come to some of the less obvious choices, the first of which is Chingling. While both Chingling and Chimecho aren't exactly the first choice that comes to mind when you think of powerhouse Pokemon, they bring a lot to the table in this challenge. First is an exceptional array of egg moves. Buzzy Buzz, Eerie Spell, and Torch Song are all fantastic, offering status control, powerful same-type attack bonus, and setup respectively. Believe it or not, Chimecho is one of our better answers to Eternatus, as a powerful Psychic-type move with same-type attack bonus will do considerable damage. Furthermore, its ability of Levitate can be useful for predicting switch-ins from Pokemon with a ground-type weakness, like Toxtricity, and it also has Punk Rock as its passive ability, to boost Torch Song and Eerie Spell even further. Chingling on its own may fail to leave much of an impression, but when you add on all of these bonuses and modifiers, it becomes a valuable member of the team, so Symphony seemed a fitting nickname. With my cost reductions, these 4 Pokemon used 9 of my available 10 points, so my options for a 5th party member were pretty limited. But thankfully, there is one Pokemon that can fill this gap: Kricketot. While the musical theme isn't as obvious here as it is for something like Toxtricity, both Kricketot and Kricketune resemble string instruments like a violin or cello, and who could forget its iconic cry? This isn't the strongest Pokemon by any stretch, but Kricketot does have a few things going for it. 2 of its egg moves, Stone Axe and Bone Meringue, are useful for giving rock and ground type coverage which Kricketune wouldn't otherwise have access to. But its best egg move is Victory Dance. normally reserved for Hisui and Lilligant, Victory Dance increases the user's attack, defense, and speed. Though tricky to pull off, 1 or 2 Victory Dances can turn Kricketune into a surprisingly capable sweeper, despite its poor stats. On top of that, its passive ability Sharpness augments the power of slashing moves, like X-Scissor and Stone Axe, to help make up for its low punching power. By this point, the creativity was running a little empty, so I just named him String Cheese. So with our team taken care of, plug in that amp and dial the gain up to 10, because it's time to see if our Pokemon band can beat PokeRogue's classic mode. As always, we start things off with the opening act in Stage 1. Let's talk about the goals for the start of the run. The early game can be challenging, with lots of weak, unevolved Pokemon like Igglybuff, Chingling, and Kricketot. But it'll be important to give these Pokemon as much experience now, while the wild Pokemon and trainers are more manageable. So I lead with Celine and sweep through the hordes of normal-type Pokemon with Drain Punch. Fortunately, it doesn't take long to start finding some great items. I find a TM for Cosmic Power, which I teach to Symphony. Though I'm not sure how useful this will be with Chimecho's relatively frail stats, the combination of Torch Song and Cosmic Power would turn Symphony into a powerful setup Pokemon. Not only that, I also find a Grip Claw, which will let me steal items from opposing Pokemon. This came right before the fight with Ivy, but sadly, neither of her Pokemon had any items for me to steal. I use Symphony to paralyze and take down her Fletchling and Snivy, receiving the usual spoils as well as a Shiny Charm and Ability Patch. The reason for this is because I recorded this during the Halloween event, which had a boosted Shiny encounter chance and some extra rewards, but fortunately none of these will have a major impact on the difficulty of this challenge. After the fight, Symphony evolves into Chimecho, and I clear a double battle of wild Pokemon to clear the first stage. Next up is Stage 2. After the first encounter, String Cheese learns Struggle Bug. While normally this move wouldn't have much value, as a special attack which doesn't complement Kricketoon's favoured attack style, reducing an opponent's special attack can be very powerful against bosses, so I pick it up in place of Growl. My priorities haven't changed, however. I'm still looking to get as much experience as possible on my weaker party members, so I take Lures and Berries to ensure my Pokemon can come out on top in double battles. And thankfully this pays off. String Cheese evolves into Kricketoon at level 15, while Celine evolves into Jigglypuff at floor 18. While Celine still has one evolution left to go, that will be dependent on finding a Moonstone, which could happen in 5 floors or 50. So it's here that I start to shift the focus to the whole team. I take down a Farfetch'd at floor 20, and with no map in hand, I'm taken to the lake for Stage 3. Now that I've secured my early game evolutions, my new focus is on preparing for the upcoming trainer battles. We've got Ivy at floor 25 to worry about, as well as the evil team grunts in Stage 4, so I look for any opportunity to improve my moves and held items. Symphony is offered an interesting move, Stored Power, a psychic type attack which starts weak but gains 20 base power for every stat increase. While this could be incredibly strong with enough time to set up, I'd have to sacrifice a powerful egg move, and it's a huge loss of upfront power compared to Eerie Spell, so ultimately I turn it down. But I do decide to teach Whiplash U-Turn over Grassy Glide. As I don't have Grookey's hidden ability to set up the grassy terrain, Grassy Glide doesn't have priority, so I value the type coverage and pivot play of U-Turn more. Versus Ivy, I lead with Symphony. Her Servine can't do much to threaten me, so I paralyze it with Buzzy Buzz, set up 2 Cosmic Powers, and sweep through her whole team with Torch Song. While I don't expect this setup strategy to come in handy too often with Chimecho, it was nice to pull it off here. Unfortunately, there's a new feature to mention here. PokeRogue now offers fixed tier item rewards from set boss battles, namely the battles against Ivy and the evil team leader, so I can look forward to more consistent upgrades after these difficult battles. After the battle, Whiplash evolves into Thwacky, and I sweep through the rest of the stage with my boosted stats until I meet my first gym leader at floor 30, Crasher Wake. While he's known for being loud, he couldn't silence my team. Symphony swept through all 3 of his Pokemon with Buzzy Buzz, and I carried on to Stage 4. Here at the construction site, Celine learns Body Slam. As Jigglypuff is a normal fairy type, this will be my best attacking move throughout the run, or at least until I can learn Play Rough and pick up some items to improve its accuracy. But reaching the midpoint, it's time to tackle the villain team, and there are a few new ones to contend with since last time, including Team Yell and Team Star. While the former would have been very on brand for this challenge, I instead find a Rocket Grunt at floor 35. This isn't the best matchup. Team Rocket typically has a lot of poison types, which fare well against both Whiplash and Celine, but I'm able to dispatch the first trainer with Symphony. The rest of the stage is thankfully pretty straightforward, but I do find a Memory Mushroom, which I use to teach Covert to Celine. This may seem an odd choice considering I just learned Body Slam earlier on in the stage, but Covert has the unique advantage in that it can steal opponents' held items. So I replaced Body Slam and told myself I'd relearn it towards the end of the run, once I'd stolen plenty of held items. Did I remember to do this? Do you even need to ask? Stage 5 is at the power plant, and it's here that I shifted my focus to the last remaining evolutions on my team that I actually had control over: Whiplash and Sting. Thankfully, I was already pretty close to achieving both. Sting evolved into Toxtricity at floor 43, while Whiplash evolved into Rillaboom at floor 44. I also found 2 PP ups, which I used on Celine's Drain Punch and Symphony's Eerie Spell, as these were the moves I found myself relying on most, which could have issues with PP. But the upgrades weren't over yet. Right near the end at floor 49, I finally found the Moonstone, allowing me to evolve Celine into Wigglytuff. I also learned Discharge on Sting. While this isn't as powerful as Overdrive, it's a good placeholder for the time being. With my team fully evolved, I've took down a Luxray to finish the stage. Next up was the Factory in stage 6, meaning more electric types to deal with, as well as steel types. Whiplash the Rillaboom took the lead, but I took advantage of any double battles to try and steal berries with Celine. The first highlight was a Reviver Seed at floor 53, which I gave to Symphony given his frail defenses. And of course, at floor 55 we find Ivy. Her Superior is fully evolved, but she switches it for Talonflame. I retaliate with U-turn on Whiplash, allowing me to keep an advantageous matchup, and set up a nasty plot with Sting. With a +2 boost to special attack, Ivy was helpless to stop me from sweeping through her team. I claimed a Wide Lens for Whiplash as a reward to improve the accuracy of High Horsepower and Sappy Seed. And before the end of the battle, Sting learned Overdrive. Overdrive, once again, is Toxtricity's signature move, and easily one of the best moves my team will have access to sweep through the floors. Truly, this move would be a great help. Or rather, it would have been. For some reason that escapes me, I just didn't learn Overdrive. Even looking back at the footage now, I can't figure out exactly why I did this, but don't worry, I rectified this mistake eventually. I did, however, replace Bug Buzz with Boom Burst, as String Cheese has me covered for Bug-type moves, and a 140 base power move, which is further boosted by PokeRogue, is hard to pass up on. There's one final thing to talk about in Stage 6, which is probably my favourite new addition to PokeRogue: Mystery Encounters. These are special encounters which offer unique scenarios. There are several different types of encounter based on rarity and biome, and these events can be good, bad, or somewhere in between. I found my first of these encounters at floor 59, and thankfully it's one of the more straightforward encounters to get us started. Before us stand 3 challenges, and I have to pick one to fight. I'll receive a reward based on the difficulty of the trainer I choose to fight, and the harder the challenge, the greater the reward. The first 2 challenges are regular trainers with scaled up teams, but the third is a gym leader, who my best guess for was Byron, the steel type trainer from Generation 4. But with another gym leader awaiting me on the very next floor, and my team looking a little weary after the previous 8 floors, I opted for the lowest difficulty battle. And it's a good thing I did. The opponent had a number of strong Steel-type Pokemon, such as Revavroom, Escavalier, and Magneton, who I didn't have many great answers to. By the time I'd finished, only Whiplash and Sting were left standing. I topped up their health before facing off against Jasmine. With my options limited, my plan was to set up a Clangorous Soul with Whiplash, in the hopes of sweeping through her team. And though risky, I managed to do so successfully by surviving the Forretress's explosion. With my stats sky high, I clear through the rest of her team with a combination of Sappy Seed and High Horsepower, securing a much needed recovery between the battle and the next stage. With stage 7, we return to the plains, and it's time for more battles against Team Rocket. Though I still struggle against many of their poison types, I leverage a few good matchups against Pokemon like Crobat and Raticate. I clear trainer battles at floor 62 and 64 before encountering another mystery encounter at floor 65, and this one was much more significant. A Pau-style Oricorio is dancing, and I have a few different options available. I can battle it and receive a baton as a reward, I can have it teach Revelation Dance to any of my Pokemon, or I can teach it a dance that one of my own Pokemon knows. This last option is only available because String Cheese knows Victory Dance, and doing so allows me to add Oricorio to my team without having to battle it. And luckily for me, Oricorio was one of a few Pokemon I had in mind as a possible 6th party member, especially because it was one of the Pokemon originally suggested when the challenge idea was pitched. So say welcome to our 6th and final team member, K-pop. I was surprised to hit the part of the band's lifetime where a new member is added and everyone says they're not as good as they used to be with the original members so soon into the run, which raises a good point of the band's name, which I hadn't even begun to think about. But if you've got any fun suggestions, then leave them in the comments below. Either way, this mystery encounter was perfectly placed, as Rocket admin Ariana was awaiting me at floor 66. She led with a Steelix against Sting, and it used Dig after shrugging off a sparkling Aria. I switched to K-pop to nullify the attack, and here it's worth noting what's unique about this Oricorio. Not only does it have Revelation Dance and Tita Dance in its moveset, but it also learns whatever dance move you used in the encounter. While Victory Dance isn't much use to us in this case, it does make for a funny reminder of how we obtained it. After a few more switches, I managed to set up a Cosmic Power with Symphony and Sweep with Eerie Spell. The rest of the stage offers me an experience share, an amulet coin, and a few extra berries courtesy of the Farfetch'd of floor 70. Stage 8 at the grassy field opens with an amusing encounter, a Lilligant. This, believe it or not, was what I initially expected my 6th party member to be. While regular Lilligant doesn't have as strong a dancing theme as Hisuian Lilligant, it still resembles a high-class lady or a ballroom dancer. And with moves like Petal Dance and Quiver Dance in its arsenal, I was prepared to make the case for it before I stumbled across Oricorio. Had I found the map sooner, I would have come to the grassy field searching for it, but as I've got Oricorio on my team now, I have no need to look for any new Pokemon. Which makes it all the more ironic that I found the map after this battle. Many more battles with wild Pokemon followed, and I claimed an Egg Voucher Plus, a Golden Punch for Whiplash, and an Iron. But at floor 77, I found an item crucial to the success of this run, the Dynamax Band. It's no secret that Rillaboom is the strongest member of the team, and with the Dynamax Band in my possession, I can start looking for the Max Mushrooms to push his power even further. I pick it up without hesitation. String Cheese takes down the stage boss, and I proceed to stage 9 in the Tall Grass biome. This stage is the final area to prepare for a boss-heavy mid-game, and now that I have the Dynamax Band, I can start looking for some of my key upgrades. But rather than finding any crazy items, I find something else unexpected. A group of Delibird are gathered, and as I approach, they look to me expectantly for a present. I've got the choice of offering them an item, a berry, or money, and while I knew that a Pokemon band would have its fans, these weren't exactly the kinds of demands I expected such fans to make. I gave the group of Delibird one of the many berries Celine had swiped, and I received a candy jar in return. A nice little upgrade from a curious little exchange. While this event was the major highlight from the stage, I did find an ever-useful berry pouch at floor 87, as well as a memory mushroom at floor 88, which I used to finally teach Overdrive to Sting. I also found my 5th and final experience share at floor 89, which is always welcome, even if my team hadn't exactly been struggling with levels by this point. The next gym leader was Gardenia, who had a number of unique grass types among her ranks. Celine took down her Roserade and Gourgeist before falling to Torterra, but with its defenses lowered, I knew it was the perfect opportunity to set up Clangorous Soul with Whiplash. Though even with the boosted stats, I couldn't use U-turn without sacrificing that advantage, so Whiplash's offensive options were limited to grass and ground, both of which were resisted. Nevertheless, I managed to take down the last of Gardenia's Pokemon and move on to stage 10. Next up was the Cave biome, a welcome respite from grass, bug, and poison types in the previous stages. I had 5 floors to prepare for the battle with Ivy, and thankfully we had a strong start. I found a TM for Play Rough, which I taught to Celine in place of Soft Boiled. Though Wigglytuff's high HP makes Soft Boiled an appealing move, Celine just doesn't have the defenses to take advantage of it, and I'd much rather have a strong Fairy type move at my disposal. I also nabbed an X Speed and a Dire Hit, to improve my odds of sweeping Ivy aside before I reached floor 95. I led with Toxtricity against her superior, and set up a nasty plot, but I was surprised to see it use Dragon Pulse instead of Switch Out. Thankfully, this was the only opening I needed. While she did eventually switch to Haxorus, I decimated it with a single attack. Her Electivire, Skarmory, Superior, and Talonflame all failed to outspeed me thanks to the X-Speed, and I took each opponent down with ease. While the rewards weren't fantastic this time, I did claim another Golden Punch for Whiplash. I spent the rest of the stage sweeping through Rock and Ground-type Pokemon with Whiplash, claiming a PP up for Symphony's Eerie Spell and a rare candy. Unexpectedly, my options for the next biome included the Laboratory, and as it's historically been one of the most difficult to reach biomes in all of PokeRogue, I knew that this would be my next destination. Much like some of the previous stages, the Laboratory was filled with Electric, Steel, and Psychic type Pokemon, none of which I have fantastic matchups against. Most of my item rewards were underwhelming, so I focused on keeping my team fit and healthy where possible, before finding another mystery encounter at floor 107. This time it was the Vitamin Dealer, a shady salesman who will sell 2 random vitamins to a Pokemon of my choice. But this comes as 2 different options: a cheap deal which may grant my Pokemon side effects, or a pricey deal which won't risk any adverse effects. I already know what some of you are thinking of the implications of my band member accepting substances from a shady dealer, but let's not dwell on that. While the gamble was tempting, I tend to stockpile plenty of money over the course of a run, so I decided to stick with the safer option and take the pricey deal. I chose String Cheese as the recipient, hoping for some boosts to attack or its defensive stats, but instead I got 2 Carbos. Sure, I'll take it. I claim a Big Nugget to rebuild my savings and finish the stage by taking down a Klinklang. Stage 12 is where I'll face off against Giovani for the first time. so upgrades are more important than ever. But the first floor offers a Mega Bracelet. Not exactly what I was after, but I pick it up anyways to remove the likelihood of it reappearing later on. Celine swept through the first Rocket Grunt at floor 112, and at floor 114 was Petrel. Petrel? Petrel? Either way, he's no slacker. His Gengar deals heavy damage to Sting, but I take it down alongside Weezing and Houndoom. But his Arbok lands the revenge kill, and Symphony falls to the Honchkrow that follows. Annihilate catches me off guard with a Meteor Mash to KO Celine, but I eventually end the battle with Whiplash. However, the real problem lies ahead. Giovani awaits on the next floor, so I spend about half of my savings healing up my team. The big bad of Team Rocket leads with Persian, but switches to Honchkrow. I attack with Sappy Seed, but miss, and switch to Sting to avoid losing Whiplash so early in the fight. I know Giovani is likely to have ground types, so I use Sparkling Aria expecting a switch, and luckily manage to KO a Rhyperior in one hit. Nidoqueen comes out in its place, and I'm unwilling to gamble on outspeeding it, so I take the safe switch into K-pop. After more switches, I land a Boom Burst on Nidoqueen, but lose Sting in doing so. Celine comes out to KO both Nidoqueen and Persian, and Giovani reveals his ace, a Mega Kangaskhan. This Pokemon is pretty terrifying, but thankfully Celine's Drain Punch is a great answer to it. I land the 2-hit KO with Celine and defeat the Doug trio that follows, leaving Honchkrow to the remainder of my team. I'd managed to succeed against Giovani, but this was by no means a walk in the park. I'll have to strengthen my team a lot more before our next meeting. Stage 12 had one more encounter worth mentioning. Another mystery encounter to be exact. Fight or flight. There's a strong Weezing guarding an item. If I had a Pokemon capable of stealing items, I could avoid a fight entirely. But this wasn't the case. I took the fight on, but this isn't just any regular Weezing. This Weezing gets an attack boost and has Parental Bond. I guess I can see the argument, but either way my team was looking even more worse for wear by the time I took it down. And worse still, all I got for my troubles was an Experience Balance. A pretty useless item. At floor 120 was Watson. I only had 3 healthy team members going into this fight. Symphony traded with his lead Pachirisu, but thankfully Whiplash managed to sweep through the rest of his team with high horsepower, bringing one of the most difficult stages in the challenge so far to an end. I was looking forward to a bit of a break with stage 13, and thankfully the frequent electric types made sweeping through with Whiplash a breeze. I picked up a Candy Jar and a Soothe Bell on the early floors, and took down a trainer at floor 125 from Memory Mushroom. I used this to teach Air Slash to K-pop, who was still missing an offensive move beyond Revelation Dance. And on the next floor, I found yet another mystery encounter. This time, it's a GTS terminal. I have the choice of checking trade offers or wonder trading one of my Pokemon, but neither of these will guarantee that I receive a Pokemon who fits the restrictions of my challenge. However, I also have the option of trading an item. I pick a Spell Tag, which I'd swipe from a trainer's Pokemon with Wigglytuff's covers, and in return I find quite possibly the best reward I could have hoped for, the Max Mushrooms. With this, I've attained the single greatest power boost left to find, and Whiplash is well positioned to take over the run. Feeling much more prepared for the threats ahead, I hurry through the remaining floors, picking up some berries and a big nugget as I go. Stage 14 is the last full stage before Ivy Battle number 5, where I'll have her Rayquaza to contend with. While Chimecho's Psychic type attacks are a good answer to Eternatus, only Celine has a good matchup against Rayquaza, so it was essential to find as many upgrades as I could to swing things in my favour. Specifically Rogue tier held items and berries. At floor 132 I find another Memory Mushroom, and seeing Baton Pass on K-pop's move list, I get an idea. While Victory Dance isn't impactful for K-pop, it's still a great stat boosting move, and passing those boosts onto a more relevant Pokemon with Baton Pass could be an effective strategy. Plus, the move seems thematic, and Oricorio feels like the kind of Pokemon who'd want to share the spotlight. After another trainer battle and more wild Pokemon, I'm nearing the end of the stage without many major upgrades. Nevertheless, I did defeat the Klefki at floor 140 and return to the lab for stage 15. Ahead of the battle with Ivy, I'm still on the lookout for berries, held items, and now X items. All I find in the first few floors is a citrus berry and a rare candy. But on floor 114, I do find another mystery encounter. A special Porygon Z stands in the way, and as I don't have a move to befriend it, nor am I willing to give up 4 berries, all I can do is face it in battle. Thankfully, it goes down without too much trouble, but I still turn up empty in the reward screen. Against Ivy, I lead with Whiplash, and use U-turn expecting a switch. While my prediction is correct, she switches to Talonflame, who burns me with Flame Body as I pivot. I send out Sting and set up a nasty plot, single-handedly taking down her Haxorus, Electivire, and Skarmory with my boosted stats. But out comes the real danger. Rayquaza. I let Sting go down and send out Symphony. While I don't have a great strategy, I know my priority is to paralyze Rayquaza so I can leverage a speed advantage. Symphony manages to do so, as well as remove the first segment of HP before falling, and thankfully Celine lands a play rough to take the legendary Pokemon down. With just Talonflame and Serperior remaining, I sweep through with both Celine and String Cheese, bringing the penultimate rival battle to a close. Just one more left, but we'll have to see if this strategy still works against Mega Rayquaza. Among my rewards was a baton, and I decided to give it to Symphony for the same reason as Baton Pass on K-pop. Switching to Sting with several Cosmic Powers and Torch Songs banked would make for a fearsome sweeper. At floor 148, I find yet another mystery encounter, a mysterious ornamented chest. I've got a 65% chance of a good outcome opening the chest, so of course, String Cheese is KO'd when I do so. I take the Gimmighoul down, and thankfully there are only a few floors left until the end of the stage, so I continue without reviving him. But at floor 150, I have an unexpected encounter with Giovani? Thankfully, this Giovani comes as a gym leader rather than the boss of Team Rocket. But with half of my team KO'd, I still have to be careful. I don't have many great options against his Drapion, so I switch to Sting and start spamming Sparkling Aria. His Nidoqueen takes me down from low HP, and suspecting Giovani might switch, I use Clangorous Soul. Thankfully, Sappy Seed takes down Honchkrow, and I'm able to sweep through the rest of his team with Whiplash. Perhaps another painful reminder to revive more of my Pokemon ahead of gym battles, but thankfully we've made it through this one unscathed, despite the close call. Stage 16 is next, and our true rematch with Giovani is on the horizon. I find a TM for Thief, and I choose to teach this to Whiplash in place of U-turn. With Clangorous Soul, I'm finding myself less willing to switch out, and I want to try and stockpile as many extra items as possible before the endgame. I also find a TM for Grassy Glide, which actually would have been useful again as Gigantamax Rillaboom summons grassy terrain, but I choose to pass on it, and ultimately make it to the end of the stage with little to show for it. For stage 17, I return to the power plant, and Giovani awaits at floor 165. I claim some berries, rare candies, and a PP up for Whiplash's high horsepower before it's time for the rematch. He leads with Tyranitar, and I use Clangorous Soul hoping he doesn't have an answer for Rillaboom. Thankfully, I'm right, and I manage to take Tyranitar down as well as Giovanni's Mewtwo with Sappy Seed. Mega Kangaskhan comes out next, and though it survives one Sappy Seed and retaliates with Fire Blast, I'm able to take it down while remaining healthy, thanks to sustain from my berries. With the biggest threats taken care of, I take down Giovanni's Excadrill and Hippowdon, though his Gastrodon manages to land a KO as I use Thief to try and steal a Lucky Egg, forgetting that Gastrodon has Sticky Hold. Despite that little oversight, it's a clean fight, and I receive the Lock Capsule and a King's Rock for Whiplash as a reward. In the remaining floors, I find a TM for Body Press, which I pass on, as well as a couple of big nuggets. Stage 18 is the last regular stage before the Elite Four, Champion, and Endgame. By now my team is looking pretty strong, other than the fact that I still haven't relearned Body Slam on Celine, but thankfully I receive a Memory Mushroom on floor 171. But if you've seen a few of these videos already, you can probably guess that I absolutely forgot, and I claimed a Lumberry instead. I also forgot to use the Lock Capsule to reroll 2 Rogue Tier rewards. Listen, I've never been punished for these mistakes, alright? There are definitely not multiple failed attempts in my recording folder that will never see the light of day. But enough about that, it's time for the brand new Wobbuffet Whack-O-Matic. It's our last mystery encounter of the run, and we have 3 turns to bring Wobbuffet to as close to 1 HP as possible, without knocking it out. I have the chance of winning fabulous prizes, but if Wobbuffet faints, I'll be paying out of pocket for its medical fees. I choose Symphony for this challenge, as Torch Song would give me a way to ramp up my damage if needed, and after 2 Torch Songs, Wobbuffet was in the red. I burned a turn with Cosmic Power and managed to earn a 3rd tier prize, a Wide Lens. Honestly, I was pretty happy with this. Another Wide Lens allows me to remove any problematic accuracy checks on Whiplash, so I walk away pleased. I sweep through the remaining floors with Symphony and Whiplash, stealing a Hard Stone from a Wild Conkeldurr for String Cheese, and claiming a Charcoal for Symphony. For the final gym leader, Jasmine makes a return. While her Forretress is tenacious, it's also a bit of a sitting duck, so I used Clangorous Soul and swipe items for free, nabbing a Silver Powder from her Sizzle, a Soft Sand from her Steelix, and a Magnet from her Magnezone. The rest of her team goes down without issue, and I proceed to stage 19 to tackle the Elite Four. Or at least so I thought. We technically won't be fighting an Elite Four this time, as instead we're facing off against challengers of Galar's Champions Cup, the first of whom is Marnie. She specializes in Dark-type Pokemon, but as threatening as her team, well, most of her team appears, she can't do much against my Gigantamax Rillaboom after a boost. I sweep her aside with ease. The next challenger is Nessa, who leads with a Bruxish. And honestly, do I even need to explain how this one goes? While you could argue that I've perhaps been relying on Rillaboom too much, it's the logical solution to a water-type specialist. I sweep through her whole team once again, using Thief to steal a few extra berries where safe to do so. And while the item rewards fail to impress, I do find a very unexpected reward of floor 195. A rare shiny Linoon, as well as a focus band from the item rewards. It certainly pays off to play during an event, and while I can't use this on this team, maybe it'll make an appearance in a future challenge. The third challenger is B, and I lead with Chimecho to take down her Crabominable. Surfetch lands the knockout in response, so I switch to All Reliable. I take down her Blaziken with high horsepower and shrug off a flying press from Hawlucha. Not wanting to risk any more unnecessary damage, I switch to Sting to take down her Phalanx, who switches in. Machamp lands a dynamic punch and Sting hits itself in confusion. But I pivot to K-pop to trade 1-for-1 with Surfetched. Celine comes in against Hawlucha to finish what was easily the most challenging battle so far. But there's one trainer left standing before the champion. I heal up my team and claim a Grip Claw at floor 187 before facing off against Raihan. I lead with Celine, and manage to take down his Torkoal switch-in after it misses Inferno. Archaladon KOs Celine in response, but KOs itself with Steel Beam. Thankfully, this activates all of my berries, so I'm able to sweep through almost his entire team with little trouble, until Garchomp KOs Whiplash, and I secure the revenge kill with K-pop. I heal Celine and Whiplash and reorganize some of my items before hurrying onwards to the final floor. It's time to face off against the champion of Galar, Leon. He leads with Inteleon, but switches to his iconic Charizard to match Whiplash. Thankfully, this is just the opening I need to set up a Clangorous Soul, and I take down both his Charizard and Aegislash with ease. Vanillux and Zacian fall to a Sappy Seed, but Dragapult survives a Thief and knocks Whiplash out after a speed boost from its berry, leaving Sting to switch in and clean up what's left of Leon's team. He thanks us for the greatest battle he's ever had, but the real challenge lies ahead. It's time for the endgame. Stage 20 is all that remains, and as always, I'm on the lookout for last minute upgrades and X items. At floor 191, I find a TM for Snarl. Those who have watched my previous PokeRogue videos will know how effective reducing special attack can be, and I still have Struggle Bug on Kricketune for the same reason. I replaced Sparkling Aria with Snarl, as I didn't expect to see too much use for it against Ivy. But if that weren't enough already, I also found my first Master Tier item of the run on the very next floor. The DNA splices. While there weren't any splices that interested me so late in the run, I was able to re-roll this into a multi-lens with the lock capsule, so I handed that to Sting as well. In the last two floors, I spent some money on re-rolls to find a Salak Berry for Whiplash and an X Special Defense. So it's time for the final rival battle at last, and she leads with Serperior. I expect the switch into Talonflame again, but this time I don't have U-turn, so instead I take it down in 2 hits with Thief. This time I have a Lumberry for the burn, but she goes straight into Mega Rayquaza. I use Sappy Seed expecting Rillaboom to set up the Leech Seed and fall, but Rayquaza misses the Hurricane. I pivoted to K-pop to rack up the damage over time, expecting to sack it off. But believe it or not, Rayquaza misses Hurricane again. Ivy switches into Skarmory, and this gives me time to set up a Victory Dance and Baton Pass back into Whiplash, allowing me to take down her second Pokemon. Rayquaza makes a return, and I switch into K-pop once again, who isn't as lucky dodging the second time. Electivire switches in to take K-pop down, but I send in Rillaboom and use Sappy Seed again, predicting yet another switch to Rayquaza. Sure enough, Rayquaza comes out, and after so many turns of damage from Sappy Seed, it's looking low on HP. I pivot to Celine, who survives a Hurricane, and steals a Scope Lens from Ivy's Electivire, before sacking off Symphony for a safe switch into Whiplash. After yet another switch to Rayquaza and one more missed Hurricane, the legendary Pokemon falls at last, and I sweep through her remaining Pokemon, her Haxorus, Serperior, and Electivire with ease. I heal up my team and claim another King's Rock as my reward, continuing onwards to floor 200 where Eternatus awaits. En route, I find some solid upgrades, 2x Special Defense, a Dire Hit, and an X Speed. The final battle is all that remains, and with all of the X items I found on the previous floors, I'm reasonably confident going into it. Sting survives an Eternabeam and lands a Snarl, reducing Eternatus' special attack twice. Sting falls to another Eternabeam, but I use this as my opportunity to switch into Symphony. While my plan was to set up Cosmic Powers and Torch Songs to become unstoppable, Eternatus was still very strong even with its reduced stats, so I was only able to deal a little bit of extra damage before Chimecho fell to an Eternabeam. So I decided to stop pulling my punches and switched into Whiplash, and after a Clangorous Soul and a high horsepower, it was time for phase 2. K-pop comes out for support, and while Eternatus is fixated on attacking Whiplash, I retaliate with high horsepower, or setting up Victory Dances with K-pop. I Baton Pass into String Cheese while Whiplash survives a lethal blow with its Focus Band, and the pair take down Eternatus together with high horsepower and Stone Axe. With that, we've successfully cleared the challenge, claiming first-time clears for Igglybuff, Kricketot, Chingling, Toxel, and Oricorio. And while it's fair to say that Whiplash was the real showstopper of this challenge, every member of the band had a key role to play. And besides, drummers never usually get enough credit, so I'm glad Rillaboom got a chance to shine this time around. Thanks for watching, and thanks again to Cade Nather for the suggestion. I'm always interested to hear what challenges you want to see me tackle next. Leave your suggestions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this video and want to see more.